From the Department of Humanitarian Initiatives, the next presentation is by Kasondra Byrd, Oumar Diallo and Julir Boonprasarn.
Lions believe that partnering is key to solving the biggest problems.
Lack of safe drinking water is a big problem in India. We have joined with Coal India Limited and Tata Projects Limited to alleviate the problem.
জলটা যখন আগে খেতাম বাড়ির টিউবওয়েলের জল তখন খুব অসুবিধা হতো
পায়ের আর্সেনিক মুখ জলটা বেশি ফেস করতে হয়েছে পেটের যন্ত্রণা হতো লুজ মোশন এটসেট্রা
28 water filtration systems have been established in West Bengal, collectively supplying more than 35 million liters of clean water per year.
জলটা আমার খুবই ভালো লাগে অনেকটা ঠান্ডা আগের জলের থেকে অনেক বেশি সুস্বাদু অনেকটা আরামদায়ক
We chose to install a water project in a school because there are more than 1,300 students and they belong to nearby villages where there is no access to safe drinking water.
বাড়িতে জল নিয়ে যাচ্ছে প্রত্যেকেই এর উপকারিতা অনুভব করতে পারছে
স্কুল থেকে যখন বাড়িতে নিয়ে যায় জল তখন মা ওগুলো সবজি ধোয়ার কাজে ব্যবহার করে এবং ভাতের জল দেওয়া এইসব জিনিসের জন্য ব্যবহার করে তো রান্নার কাজে ব্যবহৃত হয় মাঝে মাঝে মুখ হাত ধোয়া যাতে কোনো রকম গায়ে যাতে কোনো রকম অসুবিধা না হয় তার জন্য খুব মানে এটা উপকার করে
এই জন্য এই জলটা কি আমরা আরো বেশি ভুগি আর হ্যাপি
We are a global organization, but we look after the needs of the local people.
ধন্যবাদ
Greetings, Lions of Assame. I am Kasondra Byrd, Manager of Humanitarian Initiatives with LCIF, and it is my pleasure, along with my colleagues, Julie Boonprasarn and Oumar Diallo, to present you information on the grants that are available through the Humanitarian Initiatives Department. It is our understanding that Lions want to know about these grants, and we firmly believe that the more you know, the easier it is for Lions to apply. We want to make sure you have the information, the tools, and the resources you need to make your grant projects as successful as they possibly can be. Next slide, please. For Humanitarian Initiatives Department, there are regional program specialists that are assigned to each constitutional area. Myself, as the department manager, I oversee a team of 5 regional program specialists. We have Kasondra Rotolo, who covers constitutional areas 1 and 2, as well as our partnership with Special Olympics. There is Gabriella Klein, who covers Constitutional Area 3, which is Latin America, but she also manages the Lions Quest program globally. Constitutional Area 4 is managed by Julie Boonprasarn, who also covers Quebec, Canada, as well as the Middle East. She is joining me today in the presentation. Then we have Constitutional Areas 5 and 7, which are managed by Jindali Beck. Then we have Constitutional Areas 6 and 8, which are managed by Oumar Diallo, who is also joining me today in this presentation. All of these staff members work with Lions directly to guide them on their application process. This includes pre-application work, understanding the criteria, the application submission, walking Lions through that process, as well as guiding Lions on the implementation and completion of their project. Next slide, please. The primary duties and responsibilities include, of course, receiving the grant applications that are submitted to us. Of course, we receive a large number of grant applications, so it's important that once you submit your application, you do follow up to make sure that LCIF has it. In receiving applications, we review the project in providing a preliminary review. We guide the Lions on the process as well as helping to determine eligibility of your project. Assuming the project is eligible and it moves forward in the review process and it's approved, We will help Lions monitor the project. We disperse the grant funds. We review your periodic reports, which are very important to submit. And we also monitor and evaluate the progress of the project through completion. In making reports to LCIF, it's very important because we want to communicate those outcomes. We require testimonials from beneficiaries. We want to share your success stories. And we also want to make sure that other Lions, as well as our donors, are aware of the activities that the Lions are undertaking. It's really good for us to be able to promote the good work that you do. Next slide. You might be wondering what types of grants are offered by humanitarian initiatives. Well, we have categorized them under 3 headings: humanitarian, disaster, and designated. Under the humanitarian component, we have matching grants, which Lions of the Same definitely submit a large number of matching grants. These grants cover construction and equipment. There's also the Lions Quest grants. My department manages those, and that is the social emotional learning program that is offered by LCIF. Board-directed grants. You may not have heard of these before, but these are grants that are awarded at the discretion of the Board of Trustees, and these are typically projects that don't fit so nicely in the criteria of the other grant programs. Under the category of disaster, disaster is a huge proponent of LCIF grant making. There's emergency grants, which are awarded in the wake of natural disasters. There's disaster preparedness. These grants help Lions prepare in advance for disasters. Those grants are very important for regions that are frequently hit by disasters and often request emergency grants. Community recovery grants offer funding for midterm and cleanup. Major catastrophe grants are, of course, the large grants offered by the foundation. These may not be applied for by Lions, and these are often awarded in the wake of disasters where there is a huge loss of life and the scale and scope of damages is extreme. Designated grants are those grants that are funded by restricted funds. In other words, funds are donated to LCIF for a particular purpose, and those are the only type of grant projects that can be funded. So as we move into the next piece of information for LCIF, I will now turn it over to Mr. Oumar Diallo, who is the Regional Program Specialist for Constitutional Areas 6 and 8, and he will continue to walk you through information on some of these grants.
Thank you. Thank you, Kasondra. Let's start with the matching grant, which one of the most popular grants within LCIF, as it funds a variety of projects. So it supports equipment, construction needs for large scales of humanitarian. Now, through the matching grant project, community access, gain access to education, technology, healthcare, safe places for children to play, and many other life-changing improvement. Matching grants involved in identifying what a community needs the most and making it a reality. So the grant maximum, the minimum grant is, the amount is $10,000. The maximum grant amount is $100,000. So matching funds require Lions and their local partners must contribute at least 25% of the total project budget, which is a cash only. Grants are reviewed by the LCIF Board of Trustees in January, May, and August. Applications must be received at least 90 days prior to a scheduled meeting. See the Lions events calendar for specific deadlines. So now let me point out that only 2 grants open per district, or multiple districts are given any time per district. Now, typically projects includes mobile health centers for people who are disabled, or blind eye clinics, major medical equipment, nursing homes, and schools in developing countries. Next slides, please. Now, let me give you like a few tips, like the do's and I mean what the matching grants like do fund and what matching grants do not fund. Now, a few tips to think about when applying for a matching grant is for projects that are too large for a single club or even the district to do on their own. So it should serve the entire community, strengthen access, and improve service to those who are being underserved in the community, such as the disabled, the elderly, and those of low income. Now, it's also good to keep in mind that there are many things that matching grant will not fund, like for instance, salaries, stipends, scholarships, operating expenses, community beautifications projects, scientific research, single club project, Lions Club meeting facilities, and individual assistance. So like matching grants do not fund all of that. So again, the projects that strengthen access to improve the visions of a community service, projects that are beyond the Lions' financial capacity, those are what the matching grants do fund. Now we're going to give you two good examples what the matching grants are. Next slide, please. Now, this, for instance, example of a good matching grant, like the project is from District 321F in India, as you could see, students in front of their computers. The project now is for the to equip the Patiala, a deaf and blind school, to purchase like 10 laptops, 25 computers for the deaf, 15 computers for the blind, furniture for the girls in the dormitory, and then of course one school's bus to transport the students. Now, this project has benefited over 110 deaf and blind children. Funds were from LCIF, was funded for $57,600. So again, as I said earlier, these projects, like it strengthened the financial participations of two or three Lions clubs, and the Lions Club of District 321F supported the Society of Welfare of the Handicapped for over 15 years, and it also had a significant impact to students. Next slide, please. Now, another good example of a matching grant, for instance, like is establish a blood bank at Al Jabal Hospital in Kemayel in Lebanon, District 351. LCIF funded it for an amount of $49,863 to purchase equipment and furnitures. Now, the hospital had no blood bank and found it difficult to acquire enough blood and store it. So the three closest hospitals that had blood bank were around 50 to 55 kilometers away, and were very difficult to reach in the winter. So as the roads are typically closed and due to ice and snow, so LCIF helps the Lions of District 351 to purchase equipment and furniture to establish a blood bank at the Al Jabal Hospital in Kemayel. So now this is an example of a really good project. Now the strength, it supported the hospitals, local Lions Club, it served the hospital board, many lives saved due to having a nearby source of blood. Next slide, please. So the ISAMI matching grants 2019-2020. So there were 22 grants totaling $1,735,807 funded by LCIF for the year 2019 to 2020. Next slide. So now, disaster grants at a glance, what is it? So many of you probably already know what our emergency grant for natural disaster emergency grant could fund. Could be used to either purchase and distribute immediate relief supplies. Major catastrophe grants are awarded for long-term rebuilding efforts. My colleague Julie will come and talk about what a major catastrophe grant is. Long-term rebuilding effort after catastrophic disaster and disaster preparedness grants support natural disaster response and recovery efforts. So like earlier. Kasondra mentioned it about the type of grants that we fund with the Humanitarian Initiative Department. So you have the emergency grant, the community recovery grant, the disaster preparedness grants, and the major catastrophe grant. So I'm going to go ahead and give you what a good example of an emergency grant is. Next slide, please. So now the disaster grant project, what is it? What does it fund and what does not fund? The disaster grants do not fund replacement of personal property, do not fund direct cash assistance to victims, do not fund relocation costs for victims, funds being transferred to another organization to deliver relief work. However, we do fund immediate needs, including foods, water, medicines, cleaning supplies, short-term relief services, and long-term reconstructions. Those in general, what the disaster grants projects are. Next slide, please. Now, what is a good example of an emergency grant? As you know, the flood relief distributions in Amphan cyclone in West Bengal, the super cyclone storm Amphan caused widespread damage in West Bengal, in Bangladesh. So the Lions of District 322C1, as you could see on the picture, received a $10,000 emergency grant to distribute foods and medicines to the family disrupted by the disaster. So this is an example of a good project. Excuse me, because not only did the Lions distribute the emergency relief items, but they also helped would clean up and distribute cooked foods even before they received the LCIF funds. They also gave their own funds towards the project. This is an example of how Lions help our community. So Lions really do help during emergency floods like this throughout the Isami, either if it's in India, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, and in Nepal. Next slide, please. So the Isami Emergency Grant between 2019 and 2020, LCIF awarded 131 grants totaling $1.28 million, where in India, in Bangladesh, in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, and of course in Lebanon. So now I'm going to hand it out to my colleague, Julie Boonprasarn, so she'll be able to tell you more about the COVID grants and other example of emergency and major catastrophe grants. Julie, thank you.
In March 2020, due to the lack of supplies worldwide that our health workers desperately needed, the Foundation decided to temporarily modify the grant program to give grants to help Lions support our healthcare workers and our first responders. This grant program ended on June 30th, 2020. But if the Lions do plan to do projects that include PPE and equipment to address COVID-19, I recommend that they should apply for a matching grant or the District and Club Community Impact Grant if they qualify. Next slide, please. Major catastrophe grants are awarded by the LCIF chairperson for disasters that are above and beyond the scope of typical monsoons, hurricanes, and wildfires. Such an event happened in August 2019 when heavy rainfall caused a severe flood in Kerala. The LCIF chairperson awarded a $100,000 major catastrophe grant to construct 120 homes that were severely damaged or washed away in the flood. This project was chosen to be highlighted because of the size of the grant, because the Lions' identity in the project is very strong, and ultimately because the project will greatly benefit those affected by the flooding. Although Lions cannot apply for the major disaster grant, the chairperson and LCIF do take in consideration the size of the disaster and award it to those most in need. These are at the discretion of the LCIF chairperson and the LCIF Board of Trustees. Next slide, please. For COVID grants, in total, LCIF awarded 348 grants for COVID. These were a mix of emergency grants, DCG grants, and designated disaster grants. ISAME received 88 grants, totaling $853,873. This represents 25% of the total COVID grants award this year. Next slide, please. Lion's Quest. Lion's Quest is LCIF's youth development program. It's focused on creating a healthy school environment and empowering young people to make healthy decisions. Implementation grants are used to launch Lion's Quest in a particular area. Expansion grants help Lions get the program into more schools to impact even more students. Next slide, please. The focus of the Lions Quest grant is to introduce the Quest program into new areas or invigorate the program in existing areas. The Lions Quest grant does not fund other social emotional learning programs, operational expenses, work done before approval, or the paying of teachers. Please be sure to read the application in full to see if your project fits within the grant program's regulations and criteria. Next slide, please. We have a good example of a Lions Quest project that LCIF recently funded, and this is to help the Lions of Mumbai expand the Quest program into the suburbs of Mumbai. Using this funding, they will be able to give 25 workshops to train 750 participants from 150 schools. They expect this will lead to 25,000 students learning about better ways to manage their and thrive in the community. Next slide, please. Last year, Constitutional Area 6 received 5 Lions Quest grants, totaling over $500,000. Next slide, please. The Special Olympics Mission Inclusion Partnership has been in place for nearly 20 years, giving health services, educational resources, and engagement to persons with intellectual disabilities and their families. To date, we've donated a little more than $25 million and screened over 400,000 athletes. The activities are all managed by Special Olympics, and Lions may not apply for funding for this partnership activity. Next slide, please. Other humanitarian grants. Some projects don't fit within the criteria or regulations of other grant programs, but are worthy of funding. LCIF has 2 programs that try to fill in these gaps. The first are designated grants. These are grants that are funded exclusively by restricted donations. The next slide will give an example of a designated grant. The second grant is board-directed grants. These grants are for projects that don't fit in the existing grant structure, but are still worthy of funding. However, these are not funded by restricted donations, but general donations. Next slide, please. The designated example I have is the Byrd explosion. Typically, LCIF disaster grants fund only natural disasters. However, sometimes man-made disaster is so big and the Lions' desire to help is so strong that LCIF decides to track the donations coming in for a single project. Such was the case for the Byrd explosion. District 351 Lebanon was awarded a $150,000 designated grant for their project to repair doors and windows that were damaged by the blast. They were able to repair 602 homes with these funds. Now let me turn it back over to Kasondra Byrd, who will speak more about applying for grants.
Thank you, Julie. So Lions, you've received some really good information about the grants that are available through Humanitarian Initiatives Department. Some of you who may not be as familiar with the grant programs offered may be asking, how do I apply? So I am going to give you information to help you with this process. Next slide, please. So the application process, what does that include? What does it entail? How do we move through it? Number one, most importantly, is you have to read the entire application. Don't skim it. You might miss some important details because we want to make sure that you understand what you are engaging and about to do. Number two, once you've read it, answer all the questions. It's really important that you provide the information that is requested so we can conduct a thorough review. If you skip questions, that only delays the review process. Number three, the applications all ask for supporting documentation. That could be a cost estimate, it could be blueprints for new constructions. Whatever the request is, please be sure that you provide it and submit it with your application. Again, missing information will delay the review process. Number four, endorsements. Endorsements are important because it indicates that the district cabinet or the multiple district council is aware of the project being submitted and they have signed off on it. Of course, you need your district governor's signature for applications at the district level, and you need the multiple district council chairperson signature for those applications at the multiple district level. Under Humanitarian Initiative, we do not have grants that are eligible at the single club level. So that's another tip to remember. Number five, in submitting your grant application, make sure you are aware of the application deadline. Most of our grants have a 90-day deadline before the board meeting. However, some can be submitted on a rolling basis, such as the emergency grants. You want to make sure you know the application deadline, and I suggest you submit the application well in advance of the application deadline so that we can start reviewing your application sooner rather than later. Late applications do not automatically get considered for the board meeting at which they were submitted. If you submit the applications late, it's very possible your application will be held over until the next application review cycle. Number six, the application review process. This can take 2 weeks, it can take 2 months. Once we receive the application, we do get it logged in. We do assign a tracking number. That number is then communicated to the district or the multiple district. It's important that once you submit the application, within 2 to 3 weeks, please do give us a call to confirm that we have it, to make sure that we have received it. If you do not receive a tracking number from us, it's possible that we may not have received your application. So it's always a good idea to check and follow up. Once we get the application and we review it, we may have a series of questions for the Lions just to make sure we understand the goals and objectives of your project. Next slide, please. Role of LCIF staff. What is it that the staff do? We guide the Lions on the grant criteria. If you have any questions or you don't think you understand one of the criteria, please let us know and we can explain it to you. We provide a preliminary review. The preliminary review is conducted to make sure that your application you submitted meets the grant criteria. We also clarify project objectives. We want to make sure we clearly understand the goals and objectives of your project so that we can make a decision as to, is it eligible, is it not, and if it's not, how can we work with you to make it eligible or closer to meeting the grant criteria. We determine the project eligibility and guide you in other ways if it can be fixed or tweaked to some degree. Then, if it's eligible, we present your grant request for consideration. So that's our role. So I hope you understand that. And of course, if you have any questions along the way, you can always contact staff and we can walk you through it. Next slide, please. What questions will LCIF ask? There's a number of questions we'll ask regarding your grant program and the criteria that you're working to meet. We want to understand your problem identification and justification. Make sure that the Lions are addressing an unmet humanitarian need. We want to know what your strategy and your plan of action is. So always be detailed on that. The more information you give us, the more we have to go by. Partners, if you have partners involved, please give us information on your partners, how long you've been working with them, as well as information on the partners organization. We always want to know what the partner's role is, whether it's in technical support or financial support. Lions identity and involvement is a big criteria point. We want to make sure the Lions are strongly involved. They have a good relationship in the project. They are invested financially as well as in the development of the project, and that the Lions can be recognized for their role in the community with this project. Sustainability. Of course, we want to know that if LCIF invests in this program, that the program can continue. The Lions do have to outline how the program will be sustained and operating expenses, future maintenance, and future costs, how those will be covered. Budget. You have to submit a budget with your grant applications. Without a budget, we don't have a financial view of your project, and that's important. We need to know what the income sources are, what the status of those income sources are, as well as the expenses and how those figures were derived. Projects without a budget cannot be reviewed, so staff would come back to you and ask for that to be provided. Targeted beneficiaries. We want to know who the targeted beneficiaries are. This could be direct number of beneficiaries. We may even ask for an indirect number, but we want to know who you are serving, where they are located, and how many. Last but not least, there's the LCIF and Lions recognition. We want to make sure that the project is great exposure for the Lions clubs involved, as well as providing acknowledgement to LCIF for supporting the project. We would like to see every project have prominent recognition, prominent and permanent recognition for Lions and LCIF. So when you submit your application, make sure that you provide information on what that will look like and how that will be delivered. Next slide, please. Dues. What do we have to do? What's a good tip for submitting our application? Well, we have a few. Answer all the application questions. Understand the timeline. We need a timeline. Make sure you include the endorsements. Make sure the supporting documentation is there. Include photos to document the current situation. We love to see photos of the conditions before so that we can compare them to the conditions after if the grant is approved. Those photos make great opportunities for marketing post-approval. If you're building something, make sure you include the constructions and the renovation drawings. If you're purchasing equipment or supplies, be sure to include pro forma invoices. And these are basically cost estimates, which should be provided from the vendor, the manufacturer, or the retail or company that you will be purchasing the items for should the grant be approved. And please do consult your regional program specialist if you have any questions about any of these particular tips. Next slide, please. Of course, if you have do's, you have don'ts. Here's what we recommend you don't do when submitting an application. Don't be vague and provide a non-detailed application. We want as much information as you can provide so we're clear on your goals and objectives. Please don't forget to submit a budget, and please don't include ineligible expenses, consumable supplies, operating expenses, salaries. Those items are not eligible through any of our particular grant programs for humanitarian initiatives. Also, if you have overdue reports for, let's say, matching grants, you should really get those completed, as delayed final reports could cause a delay in new applications being considered. Be sure to include your cost estimates and your pro forma invoices. As I mentioned earlier, incomplete applications and those missing endorsements will slow down your application. Another tip is don't ask for more money than is allowed. Each of the grant programs have a grant minimum as well as a grant maximum. So please make sure your budget stays within that as well as the request amount. And most importantly, don't commence the project before LCIF has had a chance to review your application. Activities that take place prior to grant approval may not be considered. LCIF does not provide funding across any grant program on a reimbursement basis. So take note that the project that you're asking LCIF to fund may not be started. So I hope those do's and don'ts have given you food for thought in terms of how you might prepare your next applications. Next slide. So LCIF has a number of resources available to Lions, and we're creating new ones all the time. This resource here is called the Life Cycle of an LCIF Grant. It's really a great one-stop shop for information on how a grant application moves through the process, from assessing community needs to reviewing the grant application, discussing the project with LCIF staff, completing the application, submitting it. The application gets reviewed in the review process, how the information on approval is communicated to Lions. It talks about grant funds, how the grant funds are released to the districts or the multiple districts, how the project gets implemented, how the progress is noted, and how the progress is closed out in terms of the project's completion. This is just one of many LCIF resources we have. We also have 10 tips for applying, as well as a toolkit that walks you through implementation activities. We do hope that Lions will visit the website to look through these resources, as well as review the many grant applications that we have available to Lions. Now more than ever before, LCIF offers a variety of grant projects and grant programs that might fit your needs. So we do hope that you will consider submitting future grant applications to humanitarian initiatives, as well as to the other grant programs. The funding is there, staff is there to assist you, so we hope that this has encouraged you to move forward. Next slide, please. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at lcifhumanitarianprograms@lionsclubs.org. You may also contact me or Mr. Oumar Diallo or Julie Boonprasarn, depending on where your project is taking place. We do hope that you have learned a bit about grant applications for humanitarian initiatives, and we hope that you've learned enough to encourage you to submit applications. We will be waiting for your grant applications, and we really appreciate this opportunity to present at the ASAME 2020 Forum. It's been my pleasure to work with you. Thank you.
A cornerstone of our organization is innovation. Here to talk to us about new and emerging initiatives are Ben Futransky, Beth Smith, and Ryan Stefani.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Ben Futransky, manager of the New and Emerging Initiatives Department. And in this webinar, we're going to talk about the grant programs that the New and Emerging Initiatives Department supports. I'm joined today by my colleagues Ryan Stefani and Beth Smith. As many of you know, LCIF has many grant programs. Perhaps most famously, the Site First Grant Program, matching grants, disaster grants, Lions Quest grants, and newer grant programs such as diabetes, childhood cancer, hunger, and Leo service. Each grant program has different criteria. Many require local matching funds. Some undergo a rigorous technical review. All require some level of Lions involvement and identity. Clubs can apply for district and club community impact grants. Most LCIF grant programs are applied for at the district or multiple district level. Grant programs managed by the New and Emerging Initiatives Department include childhood cancer pilot grants, hunger pilot grants, Leo service grants, and the district and club community impact grant program. I'd like to ask Ryan Stefani to join us now to talk about childhood cancer pilot grants.
Thank you, Ben. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Lions. My name is Ryan Stefani, and I am a program specialist in the New and Emerging Department. Today, I'll be talking about the Childhood Cancer Pilot Grant Program. This pilot grant program focuses on the familial support of the child cancer patient. So this focuses on the child as well as the family of the child during their treatment process. Next slide, please. The general criteria for this grant is that grants are available between $10,000 US and $150,000 US. Districts and multiple districts are eligible to apply. And there is a matching fund component as well to keep in mind during your application process. 50% in developed countries and 25% in less developed countries. Childhood cancer grants are approved by the Board of Trustees in January, May, and August meetings, and we encourage districts and multiple districts to apply when they are ready so they can be reviewed on an ongoing basis. Next slide, please. Some great examples of past childhood cancer grants are as follows. In District 318E in India, the district constructed a child's library, children's conference hall, and a mini theater at a government-run cancer center. This allowed children to have a safe environment for themselves and their family members to relax while the children were going through cancer treatment. In the United States, District 27E2 constructed a child-friendly waiting room at a clinic that provides cancer treatment to children. And in Taiwan, District 300A3 constructed a child-friendly area at a cancer center, which included a playground, reading space, and multimedia space. Next slide, please. In addition to the childhood cancer pilot program, LCIF has a partnership with the Global Hope Partnership, which improves the cancer treatment of childhood cancer in Uganda, Botswana, and Malawi. This partnership includes a LCIF contribution of $2 million to support infrastructure projects and cancer equipment. It also includes engagement of local Lions, and it is a joint fundraising initiative. Next slide, please. The next grant I will be talking about is the Hunger Pilot Grant Program. The Hunger Grant Program focuses on improving and expanding the operations or projects that are used to facilitate and address hunger within a community. Next slide, please. General criteria for this grant is a little bit different from the childhood cancer grant. These grants are available at $10,000 to 100,000 US dollars. Districts and multiple districts are eligible to apply. And the matching component for all countries, the local contribution is 25% for all countries, which is different than the 50% that you might find in some countries. And these grants are also approved at the Board of Trustees in January, May, and August. Next slide, please. We have a great example from India, District 318C, which upgraded the kitchens and dining facilities of a rural healthcare center. So this allowed the kitchen to produce more food, and the dining facility is much larger, so they can serve more children throughout the year. The next example we have is in District 300D1. They established a permanent dining room at a feeding center. So this allowed them to not only deliver meals to the elderly at their homes, but also to host community members at their facility. And in District 35N in the United States, a food pantry or food bank was established at a local hospital so that patients were able to take food home with them after they received treatment at the hospital. Next slide, please. And if you have any questions or would like to submit an application for the Childhood Cancer Pilot Grant Program or the Hunger Pilot Grant Program, please feel free to contact us at new.emerging@lionsclubs.org. And now I will pass the presentation over to Beth Smith, who will talk about the LEO service grants and the DCGs.
Thank you, Ryan. My name is Beth Smith. I am another grants program specialist in the New and Emerging Initiatives Department. And as Ryan mentioned, I'm going to talk a little bit about the LEO Service Grant Program. LEO Service Grants are designed to support LEOs with hands-on service or volunteer activities. So with LCIF support, LEOs can make a bigger impact in their communities while also being exposed to valuable leadership and life skills. Next slide. LEO service grants are available in amounts from $1,500 US to $5,000 US. Districts and multiple districts are eligible to apply for the grant program. And successful applications will include a robust hands-on service component. Ideally, this means that LEOs would be hosting a 1 or 2 day large-scale service project with multiple LEO clubs participating. LEOs would be providing hands-on service, or in some cases, the manual labor required to implement the project, and LCIF grant funds could help support them with modest project expenses. Successful applications will also include a strong LEO and Lion collaboration. And the reasoning for this is that we believe that when LEOs and Lions are collaborating on projects, they'll have stronger relationships, and it'll be more likely that LEOs will decide to become Lions in the future. This grant program has a local matching funds requirement. 25% of total project costs must be mobilized by Lions and LEOs locally to support the project. Applications are accepted on a rolling basis, so you can submit an application for the LEO service grant at any time. Next slide, please. Here we have an example of a recent LEO service grant that was approved for District 325B2 in Nepal. The district received $5,000 for LEOs to provide meals to homeless people and senior centers. The LEOs are cooking, packaging, and distributing the meals, while LCIF funds are helping to support the purchase of the meal ingredients. So one important thing to note here in this example is that the Leos are really doing the hands-on service. If Leos were only going to the grocery store and purchasing food and dropping it off at senior centers, that likely would not be eligible because it's more of buying ingredients and delivering them than actual service. So it's important to note here that Leos are actually doing all of the work to cook and package and distribute the meals as well. Next slide, please. If you have any questions regarding the Leo Service Grant Program, please do not hesitate to contact us at lcifleogrants@lionsclubs.org. Next slide, please. Next, we'll talk a little bit about the District and Club Community Impact Grant Program, also known as the DCG Grant Program. The DCG grant is an opportunity for districts and clubs that donate to LCIF to receive a portion of those funds back to support humanitarian projects in their communities. Now we're going to watch a video that does a great job of explaining the program, especially some simple steps for how to apply for a grant once your district or club has qualified. So right now we'll go ahead and watch this explainer video.
Together, Lions and LCIF are changing the world one community at a time. And to thank you for your partnership and service, your foundation has created the District and Club Community Impact Grant. This program is uniquely designed to expand your service and help you make an even greater impact in your communities. DCGs enable clubs and districts to receive grants of up to 15% of their donations to LCIF in a given Lion year. After all, our mission is to support Lions clubs like yours, serving communities near and far. DCGs can keep funds local, helping you impact what matters most, where it matters. Clubs that give at least $5,000 and districts giving at least $10,000 to LCIF's Empowering Service Fund can apply for a DCG and do so every year they're eligible. Funds can be used when they're received or can be accumulated over multiple years for larger projects.
It takes just 5 steps to secure a DCG. First, club members choose a project. For example, Lions Club 1968 decided to host a holiday dinner at a local orphanage and donate toys to the children. The club donated $5,000 to LCIF during the Lion year, making it eligible to receive a grant of $750. Club members considered this when creating a project budget, outlining how they plan to use their DCG funds. Fun fact: DCGs provide the only opportunity for single clubs to access LCIF grant funds. With help from information on Lions Club's website, the club submitted its DCG application. When LCIF shared news that the application had been approved and grant funds were on their way, club members got to work preparing for what turned out to be a heartwarming event that fed the bellies of the local orphanage children, giving them a brighter holiday and future. After celebrating its successful event, the club reported project outcomes to LCIF, which then shared the good news worldwide.
In just 5 easy steps, from project concept to conclusion, Club 1968 brought to life a new annual tradition, delivering holiday cheer to local children. What could your club or district do with funds from a District and Club Community Impact Grant? Provide vision and diabetes screenings? Plant a community vegetable garden? Apply them to matching funds required for another LCIF grant. Each year, LCIF gets in touch with qualifying clubs and districts to thank them for their support and share news of their eligibility and next steps. As you consider the endless possibilities for your club, LCIF is working hard to help Lions worldwide make a difference.
You can visit lionsclubs.org/DCG to learn more, like when to submit an application and what DCGs can be used for. You can also email donorassistance@lionsclubs.org to see how much of your club's or district's donations to LCIF are eligible this Lion year.
Okay, now I'd like to talk a little bit about general DCG eligibility. The program began in Lion's fiscal year 2018-2019 based on donations from 2017-2018. Districts and clubs that meet the minimum donation amount are eligible to receive 15% of their donations back in the form of a DCG grant. The minimum donation amount must be achieved within one fiscal year. And one really important note that we would like to stress is that restricted donations or designated donations are not eligible to count towards DCG eligibility. This means that if you make a donation that's restricted specifically for disaster relief, for childhood cancer, for youth, really any specific or designated donation will not count towards eligibility of the program. The reason for this is that LCIF honors donor intent with their donations. So if a donor tells us they would like 100% of their donation to be used towards a specific area or project, we honor that intent, and therefore we are not able to give 15% of that donation back in the form of a DCG grant. So in order for a donation to qualify, it must be unrestricted, a donation to empowering service, area of greatest need, or a general donation to LCIF. Next slide. Clubs qualify for the DCG program by donating a minimum of $5,000 in one fiscal year. Eligible donations for the club include donations made by the club, by members of the club, or by non-members who are affiliates with the club. Next slide, please. Districts qualify for the DCG grant by donating a minimum of $10,000 in one fiscal year. Eligible district funds are 15% of the donations attributed to the district itself, plus donations from its clubs that do not reach a $5,000 minimum. So in other words, every donation, as long as it's an unrestricted donation, counts towards eligibility of the program. A club can either qualify on its own, or if the club does not qualify, their donations are calculated towards the district's eligibility. Next slide, please. If you have any questions regarding DCG eligibility or your current available DCG balance, or if you have any questions about how that balance was calculated, please contact the LCIF Donor Services Department at donorassistance@lionsclubs.org. Next slide, please. So if your district or club qualifies for the DCG program, you are eligible to receive 15% of your donations back in the form of a DCG grant. And DCG grants can be used to support any humanitarian project. And so that basic criteria allows these grants to be used for a wide variety of projects as long as they're humanitarian in nature and are making a positive impact in your community. DCG grants do not fund membership dues, club or district operational expenses, for example, clubhouse renovations, fundraising activities, or cash giveaways without specific budget for how the funds will be used. So one way to explain this is that LCIF as a foundation is required to keep track of how all of our grant funds are used. And so if you want to do a project, for example, scholarships, or giving a donation to another humanitarian organization in your community, we'll need to know specific details for how the funds will be spent. So in the case of a scholarship, You might need to tell us that the students are specifically going to be paying for tuition, helping purchase school meals throughout the year, or in some cases, perhaps the funds will be helping to pay rent or other living expenses so that the student can stay in school. But we really need to know the specifics of how those grant funds will be used instead of just saying we are giving cash away to students. DCG funds can also be used as the local matching funds requirement for other LCIF grants. So as mentioned previously, our other LCIF grant programs have different criteria, many of which require local matching funds. And so you can use the DCG grant funds available to your club or district as to meet that local matching funds requirement. Next slide, please. Okay, here we have some examples of DCG grants in Constitutional Area 6. District 325B1 in Nepal received $8,500 to purchase food for impacted impacted by COVID-19 and also purchase personal protective equipment for a local health clinic. District 315A2 in Bangladesh received $11,700 to support cataract surgeries for low-income people who would otherwise not have been able to afford the surgery. District 322E in India received $8,472 to provide vision screenings and purchase eyeglasses to distribute to low-income people. And District 306B1 in Sri Lanka received $4,599 to use as their local matching funds requirement for an LCIF matching grant that was approved to help equip a local hospital. There are a wide variety of projects you can do using the DCG grants, again, as long as they are humanitarian in nature. Next slide, please. If you have any questions about the DCG grant program or would like to learn more, please visit our website, lionsclubs.org/DCG. This is also where the video is located that we watched earlier in case you'd like to view that video again or share it with other Lions. And if you have any specific questions about the DCG grant program, please contact us at LCIF District and Club at lionsclubs.org. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to invite Benjamin and Ryan back to the presentation.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Ryan, for your presentation today. We hope all the viewers found it informative and helpful to understand these grant programs. If you have any questions, as always, don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. We'd be happy to answer them. Additionally, each of these grant programs has its own web page with additional information. And I'm happy to announce a new resource for Lions, both grant applicants and grantees, called the LCIF Grants Toolkit webpage. And on this Grants Toolkit webpage, we've put all the grant applications, all the report forms, as well as other resources such as new documents called 10 Tips to Apply for an LCIF grant and 10 Tips to Administer an LCIF grant. Best way to find this webpage is to just simply Google LCIF Grants Toolkit, and it should be the top hit. So from all of us at the New and Emerging Initiatives Department, we wish you a very happy and enjoyable ISAME forum, even if it is virtual, and don't hesitate to contact us if we can be of assistance with anything. Thank you.